We talked extensively last week about the Supreme Court decision on the Defense of Marriage Act on Proposition 8. Also talking about it quite a bit has been Bryan Fischer, who joins us today. He is host of Focal Point and also director of issue analysis for the American Family Association. Bryan, first question, were you surprised at the decision from the Supreme Court?
No, I wasn't. We've gotten to this disastrous place in American jurisprudence where we are allowing one man, Anthony Kennedy, as a black-robed tyrant to dictate marriage policy for 315 million people. It's inexcusable, but it's been coming for decades.
So when you say one man, it was a 5-4 decision, which means that any one individual could have swung the decision in the other direction. Were you equally upset when by a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court for the first time just a few years ago set precedent that the Second Amendment actually establishes the individual right to own a firearm, something that previously was not part of the legal record? Again, one person could have swung it in either direction. Should one person wield so much power in that case?
David, when the Supreme Court issues a ruling that is consistent with the Constitution, I applaud it, whether it was 5-4 or 9-0.
Gotcha.
When the Supreme Court issues a decision that is contrary to the Constitution, then I oppose it, whether it was 5-4 or 9-0.
I see. So in other words, that time it was right. So then wouldn't you be really angry at the 4 justices who seemed to be in the minority against the Constitution? Should they even really be on the court if they have such a fundamental misunderstanding of the Constitution?
Well, that's a huge problem we have, David. You're exactly right. We have a majority of justices that seem to not have clue one about what the Constitution means and what the limits and parameters of the Constitution are. So I agree with you. It's a disastrous situation, and the fact that we have ceded to these 9 tyrants this kind of authority and control would be appalling to the Founding Fathers.
Do you admit that the tide has turned in a way that we can no longer turn it back? And by we, I really mean you, the anti-gay activists, and that anti-gay activists are going to lose. You talked last week about feeling like this decision has made anti-gay activists second-class citizens. Without addressing that specifically, do you think the tide has turned and that this is really the end? This is we're going sundown on this whole thing?
Well, trends can be reversed, David. You and I have talked about this before. Trends mean nothing when it comes to what's right and best for American culture. You know, the homosexual activists in 2004, they'd lost 31 straight votes on gay marriage. They didn't say, hey, the tide is against us, the trend is against us, there's no point in fighting any longer, let's just give up.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't give up, and neither are we.
Okay. Did you cry when the Supreme Court issued this decision?
No, but I tell you, I'm very distressed for the future of my country.
I'm curious when we talk about when we talk about the future and individual states continuing to make decisions for themselves, as you talked about, and as we know, there are still a lot of states where there is not equality, there is not marriage equality. People can even be fired just for being gay. Do you think that there is going to be a limit? In other words, I think you and I, even though we have differing views, would agree that there will be more states that legalize marriage equality. Do you think that at a certain point, though, we will hit a limit? Like, will Arkansas ever do it unless it is mandated from the federal level?
Well, and if it is mandated from the federal level, then you can take a hatchet to the first 3 words in the Constitution. It's no longer we the people. It's now we the judges, or in Anthony Kennedy's case, I the judge. Those become the first 3 words of the Constitution. But the reality is, David, right now homosexuals have full marriage equality in all 50 states. Absolute full marriage equality.
Right, they can get into a straight marriage. Sure, I've heard that before. You're with Michelle Bachmann on that, right?
They can marry. They have full marriage equality. They can marry a non-relative adult member of the opposite sex, just like everybody else in America. They've already got full marriage equality. They don't want equality. They want special rights based on aberrant sexual behavior.
Well, we're not going to agree on that, but I don't want to. I know we could get into a 5-minute back and forth on it. I think my audience knows my feeling on that idea that it's not about special rights, it's about equal rights. Do you think that? Actually, let me go in a different direction. I have a feel. You and I have had a bunch of conversations up to this point over the last few years. I have a feeling that internally there's a lot of of concern in anti-gay groups like the American Family Association, Family Research Council, because even if I don't agree with you, I know you're not ignorant to the realities of the situation, and you have to be realizing that in 10, 15, maybe 20 years' time, people who are in kind of the anti-gay activist group, and that's a term you've used about yourself in the past and some of your
No,
guests.
I've never used that term, David. I am not anti-gay. I am for homosexuals. I am against homosexuality.
But you said just the other day that the decision makes anti-gay activists second-class citizens, and you talked about yourself in that group on your show.
Well, yeah, but that's the term that you use. That's not the term that I use.
No, that's the term you used on your show last week.
Well, that's because that's the term that you use. I am not anti-gay. I am for homosexuals. I am against homosexuality because homosexuality destroys the health and the spirit of the people that engage in it. So I am for them because I want them to be free from the self-destructive behavior.
But Bryan, then you were talking to another anti-gay guy, and you didn't say so-called anti-gay activists or anti-gay activists as described by the other side. You just used the term. How can you now say that that's not something you used to describe yourself? On your own show, unprompted, you described yourself that way.
David, do you want to spend another 5 minutes on this?
Okay, so you want to change topic because it's an inconsistency.
David, I've given you the only answer I've got. If you don't like it, call somebody else up and get a different answer from them.
Well, they wouldn't be able to give you a different answer for you, but okay. So my question is this, Bryan, but my question is this.
David, I'm giving you my answer. You've got it. Let's move on.
All right, just a different answer than on your show. Do you believe that you will be looked back upon the same way we now look back at those who were against racial integration, against interracial marriage? There are many on the Republican side who increasingly know that history is not going to look back favorably at being anti-gay. Is there some part of you, your kind of rational side, which we both know exists, that realizes history is not going to look back at you fondly? It's going to be just like those saying blacks needed different water fountains.
David, what God has defined, man must not redefine. Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, one word of truth outweighs the whole world. We are on the side of truth. History eventually will vindicate the position that we've taken. We're not worried about that in the slightest. And one more comment, there's absolutely no parallel between race and sexual behavior. Race is innate. People are born with a certain skin color, not a thing they can do about it. Sexual preference is a matter of choice. Sexual behavior is always a matter of choice. That's a convenient parallel, but even Colin Powell said it's absolutely invalid.
Well, we know that scientifically that's not actually the case. Bryan,
well, actually, scientifically, we know that it is the case. If people were born that way, then the concordance rate among identical twins would be 100%. If one was gay, the other would be gay. Researchers at Yale and Columbia discovered that the concordance rate is actually between 5 and 7%. They're not born that way.
That's been widely debunked. Identical twins are different in many ways, and sexual orientation is one of many ways. But Bryan, the last thing I want to touch on is, because I get hitting all the highlights from your show, I saw you talking about Bert and Ernie, the Muppets, and you said that the New Yorker is essentially promoting child abuse by putting Bert and Ernie on the cover. And when I saw that, at first I laughed, but then I said, has it gotten so bad for the anti-equality crowd? Has equality come so far in 10 years that you're relegated to talking about hand puppets on children's shows? I mean, Bryan, what's going on?
Well, David, I didn't talk about hand puppets on children's shows. The New Yorker did.
Right, and you're saying that it's a form of child abuse to have Bert and Ernie in the New Yorker.
Because they are promoting the normalization of same-sex marriage, which is harmful for children. Same-sex environments are harmful for children. It's a form of child endangerment. It's a form of child abuse.
Wow. I mean, it just the evidence just doesn't show that, Bryan. I really do feel like this. I don't know how long you guys can keep this up, but from this interview, I'm realizing that it doesn't matter what the Supreme Court says. It doesn't matter how many states legalize equality. You're going to stick to this as long as you can, are you not?
One word of truth outweighs the whole world.
All right. Bryan Fischer, host of Focal Point. Of course, we all watch Focal Point here at the David Pakman Show. Also director of issue analysis for the American Family Association. In the news all the time. He's here talking to us. Bryan Fischer, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, David. Thanks.